What is up, NFL fans, and welcome back to another episode of the NFL Whip Round. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined by Coach KT Smith. We have a lot to discuss, but before we do that, I want to mention if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, subscribe, follow so that you don't miss a thing on our NFL feed. That's Coach's call sheet, and we have a lot more content coming up as we get ready for the NFL season to kick off. If you're watching this on YouTube, like the video, subscribe to the channel with those call to actions out of the way. Coach, how's it going?
Going great. Looking forward to 4th of July. I know you're a big barbecue guy. You got 4th of July. Yeah, what are you cooking?
This year, our fireworks are on the 3rd for some reason in our area. So probably the 4th is when I'll do my grilling. And so it actually works out well for me. I might smoke some brisket and then do some hot dogs on the grill, cut them in the middle, flatten them out, and then it's kind of like a little bit holds everything in with the bun. It's really good. Try that out for those out there.
All right. Well,
So, all right, what about you? You got any plans out at the beach?
I got like 30 people coming to my house and I've done no planning. So
Nice. Yes.
Yeah.
Classic. I love it.
Yeah.
That's it in a nutshell, too. All right. I want to talk about this first topic as in case it's your first time listening. We talk about 5 topics and do a player profile here on the Whip Around. And this first one is really intriguing to me. I'm not going to pretend that I knew about this case up until it was reaching a verdict. And that is the antitrust lawsuit between the U.S. District Court and NFL Sunday Ticket and NFL. And so what this boiled down to is that the NFL is going to owe a lot of money back to both commercial and residential customers. And the residential customers could, as you put, swell as close to $14 billion. Now they're appealing, and this could be the appeal process could linger on. But there's a lot of people that are thinking that they're going to owe customers like myself. I don't know if you had Sunday Ticket as long as I did. They're going to owe us money back. Coach, what are your thoughts about this?
True. This will be very interesting, right? Yeah. The initial judgment was $4 billion, but there's all sorts of extenuating circumstances that could cause it to swell to around 14 billion.
Jeez.
I don't, whether or not they ever pay that or not, we'll see. Or any of it, they're going to appeal. This thing could wind up all the way in the Supreme Court. The current makeup of the Supreme Court is pretty conservative. It's really sided with business being absolved of this. On the hook for this. And the way I understand it is it will come out essentially as a chunk that each franchise would owe, which would be somewhere in the neighborhood. If you go on the high end, if you go up to the 14 billion, it'd be in the neighborhood of $400 million per franchise, which a lot of franchises would not be able to pay. Or, well, they'll pay it, but they'll struggle to pay it. It'll be very, very interesting to see what the price tag winds up being in the end, if there is one, and then how the league decides to go about essentially collecting that money from all the franchises. Because you've got certain ownership groups that are going to be like, oh, fine, it's an annoyance, but we can pay it. But then you got smaller ones like the Steelers and the Green Bay Packers and teams like that if they had to come up with a couple $100 million, it would be a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the next question that we're going to ask is, let's assume that eventually they are going to have to pay. You have these groups that are not the Dallas Cowboys that are worth billions, and they can easily say, okay, we'll pay it and move on with our lives. What does that mean for the consumer? Because yes, the consumer like myself, who's had Sunday Ticket for, I think that goes back to I think I started in 2010 when I started getting Sunday Ticket. I've had every year since. So they're gonna owe me money. But besides that, are they gonna also get it back by jacking up the price of tickets and of concessions and all this stuff? Are consumers going to get screwed in the end, Coach? What do you think?
They're absolutely going to do that. And you may also see them now push really hard for that 18th game, because that's a ton of revenue that they can take in as well. So, yeah, I don't expect the owners to simply write checks and say, hey, that's on us, our bad. They're gonna push that cost off onto the consumer somehow.
I would love to know, because how much are the owners involved in these type of negotiations, and not just the negotiations for the NFL Sunday Ticket. And this was back when DirecTV and AT&T had it, but also when they chose YouTube TV over ESPN and over Apple Apple TV that wanted Sunday Ticket last year. How much is an owner like Art Rooney II or Jerry Jones involved? Or is that Roger Goodell and his cronies making those deals? If I'm the ownership and I didn't have a say in this, then why the hell should I have to front the bill is my question. And I don't know if there's an answer for that.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question as far as how much ownership's involved. My guess, though, is not a lot. I don't think that that's the type of thing that the ownership groups would be heavily involved in, which then, comes back to your point that I'd be pissed if I were the Rooneys or somebody else. And you're telling me I'm on the hook for something that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. And that people have said that the consumer, if you are like me and have been a Sunday Ticket subscriber for a really long time, you could see upwards of $5,000 returned to you. I'm not about to hold my breath for that, but at the same time, if I did receive that money, I'm not going to complain. So we'll see. We'll see if that pans out.
Well, I was part of a concussion class action lawsuit that I did not know about and was informed of, that if you played NCAA football between the years of 1982 and like 1998 or whatever, you could be a party in a class action lawsuit about concussions. So I put in for it. And long story short, I got $62. So
yes.
Yeah. Took the family out to a nice breakfast, and that was about it.
Well, there you go. For all the concussions you've dealt with, $62. There you go. All right, let's move to our next topic, still surrounding money. And this time we're talking about the city of Jacksonville recently approved a $1.4 million renovation on Everbank Stadium, home of the Jaguars. It pretty much kills the speculation that Jacksonville might one day relocate to London, where they've played 11 times over the past several years. It may not be the Jaguars, but how far away do you think the NFL is from approving its first foreign franchise? This is a tough question to answer because I think there's a couple ways they could go. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, how many guesses would you have had to have gone before you landed Everbank Stadium as the home of the Jaguars?
Yeah, no, wouldn't have known that.
Are you old enough to be able to like remember when you could actually name this team with the stadium? Because when I was growing up, it was the stadiums kind of had names that were relevant to the teams, or that at least you had Mile High Stadium in Denver, and you had the Superdome, and you had Foxborough and Three Rivers, and they all had an association. But now with all the corporate names, I have no idea what stadiums are where.
Well, what sucks too is when they change. So I guarantee you in 2001, when Heinz Field was built, everyone's like, oh my gosh, Heinz Ketchup, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Like that makes so much sense. Heinz Field. Now it's like, well, yeah, they play at Heinz Field. No, they don't. It's Acrisure Stadium. And so when things change, that's when it gets really confusing. I do know, did know at one point, a lot of them, but yeah, a lot of them have changed. And, you have Cleveland got naming rights on their stadium. I don't know what that is. The Bengals are the same. It's a nightmare. But anyways, what's your take on a team going and being overseas as their home turf?
I think we're a long way away from that. I think the NFL in a dream scenario would love that because now you can market globally. But the logistics of that is just going to be incredibly accommodations. If you have a team in London, for example, are you just simply going to say, hey, you got to go play that team in London and then fly back to the United States and then just play a regular Sunday game the next week? I don't know. Maybe they can get it done, but it feels to me like it's a long ways away.
I think that the first step in this even being entertained is an 18th game regular season, because I assume that when you go to 18 games, you're going to have 2 bye weeks, in which case you could then build that in if they do have to go overseas and play a game. I also don't foresee a team moving from the U.S. to somewhere overseas. In this case, we're talking about London. I think that if the NFL were to choose to expand, then that's when they would entertain potentially having a team, just the franchise starting in London. Therefore, the fans would be more bought in to the product there. It would be their team. It would be their home. I think that's the smartest way to go. The NFL doesn't always do things the way I deem to be smart, but we'll see. I agree with you, though. I think it's a ways off. I don't think that they're in any way, shape, or form ready to do this from every possible avenue. Like you say, the rest, travel, all of it. So I would say the first step is the 18th game. Then if they're looking to expand, then I think that's when they'll have that conversation. Yeah. It's going to be tough, though. it's also a tough sell when you have a town like St. Louis who just will support a team. They supported the UFL team there this year. And if they were to say, oh, we're giving a team to London, and St. Louis is like, well, the hell did we do? The owner screwed us. We didn't do anything. We supported the team when the Rams were there. That sucks, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Let's go to our next topic. An article from The Athletic cited the Packers and Bengals as the most underrated teams in the NFC and AFC, respectively. Do you agree with that assessment? And who are the most underrated teams in each conference? The Packers and Bengals. The Bengals? That's interesting. What do you think?
Are the Bengals underrated?
That's why I said that. I was like, the Bengals are in a Super Bowl 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I read a lot of stuff, and there's a lot of people that think that with Joe Burrow healthy and bringing back a bunch of their core, that they're a Super Bowl team or at least contender again. They definitely don't strike me as an rated team. The Packers maybe a little bit, because now Detroit's the darling of that division, and everybody, when they talk about the NFC, they kind of start that conversation with sort of San Francisco, Philly, and now you have Detroit in there. And Green Bay obviously did some good things at the end of the season last year, and then the big playoff upset in Dallas, and probably should have beaten the 49ers. So, I mean, maybe they're a little bit under the radar, but it's hard. But again, they're the Green Bay Packers, man. They're a high-profile franchise. So I don't know if I would call either of those teams underrated so much. I mean, when I think about the AFC, and this is going to be a total, and if Pittsburgh can get Russell Wilson to play like Russell Wilson, not Russell Wilson 2015, but Russell Wilson 3-4 years ago, I think the Steelers could be a really good team and surprise a lot of people.
I think it all comes down to your definition of underrated. Like, how do you define underrated? I think personally for me, underrated is someone that is not getting any type of, no one's talking about them. They're not getting any type of accolades. They didn't make the playoffs last year. I don't think so. So, I mean, if I'm doing that criteria for the term underrated, well, the Bengals didn't make the playoffs, but again, with Joe Burrow, this team was in a Super Bowl 2 years ago. So what are we talking about? I don't think that falls into that category. In the AFC, you might be able to say that a team like the New York Jets, even though they get a lot of publicity because they're in New York and they've got a pretty good roster, but are they underrated on the field based on how they played last year? I don't know if I'd go that far. I would even say that an underrated team could be the LA Chargers. They have the quarterback. Everyone thinks they have the coach now. They started to reshape their roster. Maybe they make some noise in the AFC West. In the NFC, I think Green Bay maybe could be, but they made the playoffs last year. I think an underrated team could be the Minnesota Vikings. I think their roster is better than a lot of people think. And if I'm running through the gambit of NFC teams, I do think that for the New Orleans Saints, this is kind of like their last year. Like it's now or never, especially with the Derek Carr situation in a really bad division. They could be underrated, and so could the Atlanta Falcons with Kirk Cousins. So I'm going to go those routes. But then let's look at the other side of the docket, the teams that are overrated. Now, Coach, let's talk about it. They said, The Athletic, Baltimore and San Francisco were overrated. How would you define someone that's overrated?
Well, I think overrated sometimes is a product of teams falling back on the previous year's success and anticipating that success again. In that sense, I can see why people would say, hey, maybe the Ravens, simply because they lose their defensive coordinator. He's been great for a long time. And they obviously lose some pieces at the skill positions as well. But for me, I have a hard time considering the Ravens to be underrated when you bring in Derrick Henry, because that could be an absolutely phenomenal fit there. And I just think that, man, if that part of the equation goes right for Baltimore, then they're going to be just as good as they were a year ago. San Francisco is an interesting choice. Are the 49ers overrated? I don't know. They brought back their whole core. I mean, who did they really lose? I know they got, like, Dre Greenlaw's got a big injury that he hasn't recovered from, but the offensive core is still in place.
So I guess my question is, could a team be overrated and underrated? Because I think the Jets could fall into both categories. They're underrated because they were so bad last year, and if they get all the pieces back, they could be better. But then they do get so much media attention, I feel like they could also be overrated. And that if Aaron Rodgers is not the Aaron Rodgers that we know even of 2 years ago prior to the Achilles rupture, then maybe they are an overrated team. Some people might think the Miami Dolphins fall into this category as being overrated. That people are like, look how fast they are. And they start out the season so great. And then once the weather turns, it's like they're Cinderella turn it into a pumpkin, all that stupid crap from the fairy tale. And so I look at it and say, maybe the Miami Dolphins are overrated. Yeah, they get Odell Beckham, but what are they going to do with Tua? Is he that guy? And the NFC side of things, when you talk about overrated, I don't think San Francisco is overrated because I think they are really that good. The way Philadelphia ended last year makes me wonder if they're overrated. I think Dallas has been overrated for like 2 decades, so I'm not even going to go in that direction. But Philadelphia, coach, you live in like Philly country. They have to be concerned. I know everyone's all honky dory and they'll be fine. Jason Kelsey retires. Jalen Hurts, there's questions about him. They gave a lot of money to their receiving core. They got to play. They got to pan out with Saquon Barkley staying healthy. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I personally love the Saquon Barkley fit. But yeah, you're right. There's concerns about the Eagles. I would absolutely go Dallas simply because they have not been to the divisional round or past the divisional round in 30 years. And every year, everybody talks about them like they're a Super Bowl contender. It just kills me. And Miami, I agree with Miami's because so much of that offense is based on their speed and the timing of the offense. They're an injury or two away from derailing a lot of that. And they're such an RPO heavy team. They're so heavy into the read options and the horizontal game. And that has not yet proven that it can stand up in cold weather. And so I'll be very interested to see their arc and whether or not defense coordinators start to figure them out a little bit, right? Yeah. I mean, Mike McDaniel, I think he's a really innovative and interesting guy. But like we were talking about on our show last week, it's, your window for being the innovator in the NFL is small because people figure you out and catch up very, very quickly. And then it's a copycat league. And if it works for one team, it works for another. So it'll be really interesting to see how quickly they get figured out.
All right, well, let's go to our last topic, talking about the 49ers as potentially being overrated per The Athletic. The wide receiver that everyone's talking about for San Francisco, Brandon Ayuk, he's been the subject of a lot of trade talk the past few months, whether it was the Steelers, the Commanders have been involved, all of that. And they remain at odds. And they met. I don't think they're planning on moving Ayuk unless the deal is phenomenal. But Ayuk himself went on the Pivot podcast and said he could see himself being traded to Pittsburgh or Washington. A deal to either team seems like a long shot, but if Ayuk were dealt to one of those teams, which situation would be the best for him? I think we both know the answer, but I'll let you go first.
Well, you can make an argument that Washington would be a good situation for him because he'd get to step in and be like their number one guy. The fact that they've got a rookie quarterback there, learning a new system for an offensive coordinator in Cliff Kingsbury, who hasn't had a ton of success so far in the NFL as a coordinator or as a head coach / coordinator. There's a lot of unknowns in that situation. If Ayuk went to Pittsburgh, he'd be slotted opposite George Pickens with an established quarterback in an offense that's going to be able to run the football and get a lot of one-on-one matchups for their wide receivers. That seems like a great situation for him. I'm suspecting you're going to agree with me, but I'll kick it to you.
Yeah, he is really tight with, is it Jaden Daniels, the quarterback that was drafted by Washington? They are really close, so he might want to play with his friend. But at the same time, I'm really curious, and we talked about this last week, what the 49ers are going to do. The 49ers have no reason to trade this guy. None. It would have to be a team's like, I'll give you a king's ransom. And I don't see the Steelers doing that. While I do think it's a better fit from a football standpoint, I don't think the Pittsburgh Steelers as an organization are going to do that and just roll out the red carpet for this guy. And so I think the 49ers are smart to just say, we're going to let you play this year out. And then maybe they franchise tag him, or maybe they let him walk and get a comp pick for him. They'll probably get a 3rd round pick for him. If not, and they can move that pick for wherever they want. They need him. They need this guy this year if they want to win a Super Bowl. And so I don't think he gets moved. Do you agree? Do you think he gets traded before the start of the season?
Not like you said, not unless the offer just blows them away.
Yeah.
San Francisco's got all the cards right now, and they've got a Super Bowl team, and I think they're going to run it back and take another shot at it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And again, I'm fascinated with how they're going to handle it. I don't think it's going to be as exciting as most people think because I don't think they're going to do anything. So, all right, let's finish this show up with a player profile. Last week we did Barry Sanders, and that was because Barry Sanders had a heart related incident over Father's Day weekend, and so I just wanted to give a shout out and of appreciation for all the young fans out there. And you chose this one this week, and you went with Bo Jackson, who was recently inducted into the Kansas City Royals Hall of Fame. People don't realize how good of a ball player, and I say ball player intentionally, how good of an athlete this guy was. I'll let you go first. What are your thoughts on Bo Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, that's really why I chose of young Barry Sanders and said there hasn't been anybody like him since. Well, nor has there been anybody like Bo Jackson since. Bo Jackson was an absolutely dominant player in two professional sports at the same time, which is mind-boggling. I mean, he was, now granted, he didn't play full seasons in either, which was crazy. He played baseball until the season ended in late September, and then he went into football season, usually having missed the first month of the season, and with almost no training camp, no nothing, no real warm-up, stepped onto the field and was one of the best players in the NFL. I mean, his highlight reel is mind-boggling. If you just do you can find on YouTube highlight reels of Bo Jackson where they're splicing his baseball exploits and his football exploits. And you see him hitting monstrous upper deck home runs. The famous catch where he catches the ball on the warning track in a full sprint and then runs up the wall like he's Spider-Man. And then him trucking linebackers and running away from defensive backs. And the absolute sin of it all is that it was cut short by a career-ending hip injury after about 5 professional seasons in both sports. Had he not lost his ability to play longer, I think he's the kind of guy that could have probably made 2 Hall of Fames. And who, professionally anyway. I mean, it just feels like that's impossible these days.
Yeah. I mean, Deion Sanders did it. I'll give Deion credit. He did it with the Falcons and with the Braves. And I remember a helicopter taking him from one to the next and all that. And of course, Prime made it prime time. But Bo Jackson did it with very little fanfare. And it's unfortunate that his football career got cut short. His baseball career was very underrated. It was very feast or famine like. I mean, he would hit those bombs and then he'd strike out and snap the bat over his head or his knee. It looked like a twig. Like it was, I would hold up a bat in my house like we have a wooden bat. I'm like, how is this guy breaking this so easy? I could sit there and hit it with my knee and a million times and never even splinter it. But at the same time, I thought that the most impressive part of his game in terms of baseball was his arm. This guy threw his arm is like a rocket. And there's a play, you can look it up. Harold Reynolds that was on ESPN. He's on MLB Network now. He was on first base. He had some speed back when he played, I think, for Seattle. There's a ball. He's on first base. There's a ball hitting to the corner. Bo Jackson's playing left field. And so it's rumbling around the corner. Bo finally corrals it. And Harold Reynolds is rounding second thinking, I'm going to score easily. And Bo throws a ball from the base of left field wall home to home plate. And it looks like a missile. I mean, it is unbelievable. The only guy I've ever seen with a similar arm was probably Roberto Clemente, which I didn't see live, just in my dad's stories and watching on TV, but unbelievable athlete. And I remember there was a 30 for 30 on him, I think, or maybe it wasn't a 30 for 30 in NFL Films that is special. The guy also didn't train. Like he never worked out. He never did sprint work. I think his training consisted of bow hunting. Like he would just go out and go bow hunting. But this guy's the most natural freak of nature that you've ever seen in your life. This isn't an Adonis like a Terrell Owens who's working out in his driveway and he's just ripped to shreds. Bo Jackson was just naturally like that, a naturally gifted athlete. Just phenomenal stuff. Any final thoughts on that?
Again, if Bo Jackson were Bo Jackson today, we would all hate Bo Jackson because it would be 24/7 media blitz, like every social media network outlet, etc., bombarding you with him. And that's the thing that made him kind of amazing, is that for as amazing as he was, he was sort of understated. You actually kind of wanted more Bo Jackson, because whenever you'd see him, you'd be like, oh my God. So he's just like Barry Sanders, man. Totally unique.
Yep. And if you're a young fan listening, go look it up, learn a little bit about the history of the game. And that's not too far off history. He was really, really good. So, Coach, it's been a good show. What is your call sheet for this week?
Yeah, well, so I'll mention this real quick. Still putting the podcast together, but the on the Twitter, the coach's call sheet, we've been doing the Gridiron Glossary segments, and on Monday we kind of dropped a new regular segment we're going to do, where we're taking our favorite play designs of the 2023 NFL season and just doing really short 60-second breakdowns of the play. We started with the Eagles running a smoke concept, a perimeter screen to a tight end. The next one's going to be the Lions running counter gap out of a 9-man line. So, we're looking for kind of like interesting, sometimes unusual schemes that were really effective, and we're going to profile them a couple times a week.
That's awesome. I look forward to all that stuff. Good stuff as always, Coach. Until next time, man, take it easy. We'll see you on the NFL Whip Around.